We were thinking about having the beginning of the Mass, instead of the penitential rite, be the sprinkling with holy water as a very appropriate thing to do on the feast of the Lord's baptism. But since we were upstaged by that, we decided to just do the normal penitential rite. Enough is enough. Today's the last day of the Advent Christmas season. We begin what is unfortunately called ordinary time tomorrow. Maybe it'd be a good idea to just take a look back over what we've been celebrating. On Christmas, we were told that the shepherds returned to the hills after they had had this meeting, this experience with Christ as an infant. And that's the last we hear of them. I wonder what went on in the hills after that period. Do you think they just went back to playing cards or whatever shepherds do during the night? I'll bet that they discussed and discussed and discussed what they had experienced, because they certainly did not understand it fully. You can be sure of that. And then last Sunday we were reminded that the three kings, or the kings, came from the east, and they had an experience of the Christ newborn. And they gave him gifts. But there's no mention that there was an exchange of gifts. Jesus didn't give them the catechism of the Catholic Church as an exchange gift so that they would go back to the east, to their own country, and know the whole story. I think they spent the rest of their lives puzzling over what they had experienced and trying to make sense of it for themselves in the way they lived. As a matter of fact, all Christians have been doing this since the birth of Christ. All Christians have constantly discussed among themselves, prayed over, tried to understand the ramifications of what we celebrate at Christmas time in their own lives and in their own time. They did this even before there was any New Testament to go to get some details. They were working on the verbal account of the eyewitnesses, and it wasn't until the eyewitnesses started to die out that we got the Gospels written up, so we would have something to go on until Jesus returns. And you can be sure, because we know this as a fact, that the Christians did not all agree in their discussions about what they had experienced. There was an awful lot of argumentation, fights, if you will, people breaking off and saying, I can't go with that. And the ones who stayed called them heretics or schismatic. This has been going on, and it's going on today. You read the newspapers. We are still trying to decide how to take what this Jesus told us and exemplified for us and apply it even within our own church in practical matters. That's wonderful. Because Jesus didn't give us a booklet, a catechism, with all the answers and all the applications. Because, first of all, the things that we have to think about never even occurred to the early Christians. Look at what we know and can do in our world, in our cosmos, in our planetary system. We can fly there. All these questions in medicine and health that would never have occurred in those days are occurring now. And we have to take our experience of Jesus and apply it to our experience of life. And we will not always agree together on what should be done. But Jesus said, when I go, I will send you my Spirit, and my Spirit will lead you into all truth. Not like that, but gradually. And that's what's happening now within our Christian community, that some people get upset about because they say, oh no, it's all cut and clear, it's black and white, we grew up knowing what was for. Well, it's not that way. We were deluding ourselves for a long time thinking we had all the answers to all the possible situations or experiences that we could have as time went on. So we're like the shepherds, And like the wise men, I hope we're like wise men and women, that we don't succumb to this having all the answers, that we are humble enough to apply to our own day and our own life what Jesus has taught us and exemplified for us. For instance, I am sure they bickered over the baptism of Jesus. How could Jesus be baptized? He was God. He was sinless, right? But the whole point, and this is why this feast is so wonderful to end the Christmas season, the whole point is that God came into our world as one of us and took on himself all of the sins of the world. Paul says in one of his letters, which was written to try to settle some of these disputes, Christ became sin for us. He became sin for us and took us and all our weakness and stupidity and sinfulness into the waters of baptism symbolically and was raised up. And then he lived out that experience and was raised up again at the end of his life on the cross. But he was also raised up again at the end of his life from the grave. And we were involved in that. That was our destruction and death and our resurrection to life. See, that's the whole Christian message in a nutshell. And that's why this feast is so important at the end of Christmas, because it sets the perspective for the way we live our lives. Not knowing all the answers, being humble enough to admit it, and to constantly seek the strength and the insight and the wisdom of the Spirit of Jesus, which abides in each Christian by baptism, and in the total Christian community by the indwelling of the Spirit. For where two or three are gathered, there am I in the midst of them. So we have nothing to fear for the future of our church or of our own lives. We just have to submit ourselves humbly to the direction that God is leading us in. Will we make mistakes? You bet we will. We have a long history of making mistakes. But eventually we get it right. So the days ahead are not ordinary time. There has been no ordinary time since the first Christmas. Everything now is extraordinary if we have the eyes to see it. And the eyes are the eyes of faith.